Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Madanugrahaya paramam guhyam adhyatma samidam Yatvayoktam vajastena mohoyam vigato mama. Arjuna says to Krishna, Mad anugrahaya mama anugrahatam paramam niradishayam guhyam gopyam adhyatma samidam atma viveka vishayam yat tvayoktam vacho vakyam tena te vachasa mohoyam vigato mama. In other words, to bless me or to bless me, Krishna, Arjuna is saying to Krishna, Mama anugrahatam, in order to give me this benediction, paramam, the supreme realization, knowledge, miradishayam. Miradishayam means which is beyond our imagination. Miradishayam, guhyam, and the most confidential, gopyam. Adhyatma samidam. The spiritual perfection of knowledge. What is that? Atma viveka vishayam. The self and the non-self. In other words, the soul and the matter. That difference between the soul and the matter. Yet tvayoktam, what you have spoken, vacho vakyam, those words what you have spoken, tenate vachasa mohoyam vigato mama, which I have heard from you, and my moham or illusion has gone. This is what Arjuna says to Krishna. Madanugrahaya paramam guhyam adhyatma samidam yatvayoktam vachastena mohoyam vigato mama. Mohoyam vigato mama. So here we were talking about that knowledge what is when there is knowledge of Krishna, knowledge of the soul, that is knowledge. Ignorance means not knowing Krishna, not knowing soul, but implies knowing every other thing. While knowing Krishna, no other thing exists. Other things have no existence. And that is what the difference between knowledge and avidya and vidya, knowledge and ignorance, what was spoken earlier. So, we were discussing this. What was that? That moham. What was that moham? Moham is this, that objects in this world will give me happiness. That is moham. Any understanding that anything in this world will give us happiness, or anything is worthwhile taking shelter of, or it is going to make me happy, this is the greatest illusion in our mind. That is what Arjuna is calling it as moham here. So when that moham leaves, as in the case of Sudama, as well as in the case of Ambarish, irrespective of what their material situation was, one was extremely poor and the other one was extremely rich. Irrespective of what their situation was, they were free from this moham, from delusion. That is why that they were able to stay in their shanti, in peaceful state, irrespective of what their material conditions were, because they had no, this illusion wasn't there in them. So if we come to understand this Brahman means this illusion in us, that it is a kind of a blind belief in one way, that for example you can see sometimes millions of miles away, the scientists have found a new planet. They have found a new planet. Now, if you have found that planet, has it made any difference in your life? Nothing has changed here. Has God given any benefit, any happiness in any way? So, simply by thinking about that planet and you go to sleep, you get a better sleep because of that you have found out a new planet. No, nothing has happened. This is the kind of Brahman. This is the kind of illusion what we have. In other words, nothing that will benefit us in any way, we found out about them, and knowing about that and endeavoring to find out knowledge of that and throw them away everything and to inquire about the soul and knowing about oneself, in other words, or one's own identity, and that alone will bring Shanti. In other words, when you find out what is Krishna, what is soul, that brings Shanti. That is why Arjuna is saying here that this word, by hearing your words, saying to Krishna, by hearing your words, my ignorance is gone. Mohoyam vigato mama. Mohoyam vigato mama. And in other words, only by hearing about the soul, that illusion will go. That illusion will go from inside. And that is what it is in the next verse you will see. Bhavapyayau hi bhudanam Shuto vistarasho maya Tattva kamala bhatraksha Mahalpam abhijavyayam Bhavapyayau hi bhudanam Shuto vistarasho maya Tattva kamala Bhatraksha Mahatmam Abhijavyayam Bhavapeyo hi Bhudhanam Shruto Vistarasho Maya Tattva Kamala Bhatraksha Mahatmam Abhijavyayam. Arjuna is saying, O lotus-eyed one, I have heard from you in detail about the appearance and disappearance of every living entity as realized through your inexhaustible glories. Inexhaustible glories. Here you will see how Arjuna is realizing Krishna. If you read that purport, you will notice something very interesting. Arjuna says here, Arjuna addresses Krishna as a lotus-eyed. Krishna's eyes appear just like the petals of a lotus flower out of his joy. Krishna assured him in the last verse of the previous chapter that he sustains the entire universe with just a fragment of himself. He is the source of everything in this material manifestation. Arjuna heard of this from the Lord in detail. Arjuna further knows that in spite of his being the source of all appearances and disappearances, he is aloof from them. His personality is not lost, although he is all-pervading. Although he is all-pervading. So these two things, personality and all-pervasiveness, exist simultaneously in Krishna. All-pervasiveness and knowing both is complete knowledge. Not only knowing one thing. Knowing this all-pervasiveness and knowing this personality, both are equally important. And Arjuna says that he sees that both, Arjuna here, he mentions that Arjuna, his personality is not, although he is all-pervading, although he is knows that in spite of his being the source of all appearances and disappearances, he is aloof from them. That is the inconceivable opulence of Krishna, which Arjuna admits that he has thoroughly understood. Now, Arjuna says here that I have heard about their glories. That was what was spoken in the last chapter. Bhavapeyo hi bhudanam shuto vistarasho maya. That vistarasho means that in elaborately I have heard from the last chapter. And Mr. Tattva Mahalpam Abhija Avyayam, he says. And that Mahalpam, that glory is Avyayam, inexhaustible, which never decreases. In other words, you cannot, no matter how much you try to explain Krishna's glories, it is unlimited. In other words, Arjuna is recognizing Krishna's position as the absolute truth, not only from a personal level but as Brahman as well. From a Brahman as well. So you can see here that what does it mean? Inexhaustible means it never gets reduced. It never gets reduced. Suppose you take something out of it, it never gets reduced. That means from that consciousness, prapancham, or the creation, that creation is happening from the consciousness, isn't it? Bodham, avabodham, isn't it? Sandram, anandam, avabodham. That avabodham, chit shakti, what we refer to, sattva, chitta, anandam, isn't it? Ishvara, Parama, Krishna, Sachidananda, Vigraha. That sattva, chitta, anandam, three things. In that three things, the chit shakti is the most powerful thing. It is from there all the creation happens, including the mind, intelligence, everything is coming from the chit shakti. So that chit shakti's operation is what is spoken here, that even though so many living entities are coming out from there, the creation is coming out from there, in spite of all that, chit shakti is still present as it is. It never gets reduced. It never loses its capacity. That is the power of that bodham. You can imagine that. From that pure consciousness, everything happens. Whole creation comes. All living entities comes out. Remember in the beginning what I mentioned. It is from creation, as far as the Vedas are concerned, it is Chit Shakti from where creation happens. See, in Puranam, in all the Puranam, different Puranas, there is a little bit difference the way creation is spoken. I mentioned that so many times before. That in Bhagavatam there is one way of creation spoken. Primary creation, secondary creation through Brahma and through Prajapatis like that, Dasha Prajapati and all that. Now you may, I don't know how you felt, when you read that, you will see Brahma has created all these Kumaras, 4 Kumaras. Lord Shiva came from the from Brahma, and then Prajapatis came from Brahma. Some of them are Manasa Srishti. Manasa Srishti from the mind. He has created, Brahma has created. Now these things are very inconceivable for us in our present state, isn't it? How that creation happened. So, purpose of all this is not to confuse us with creation. Because we have a desire to know, this is very strong in us, isn't it? Where this creation has come from. In all of us, isn't it? And that is why the scientists are after researching how the origin of the creation, origin of the universe has come. They are trying to find out through their research process. The sages have already thought all these things much more in depth than what the scientists are talking about today. And they have come to know that unless the attention goes into the person who is researching, rather than what is the object that you are researching, that is where the key for all this research is, who is this person who is researching? And that is inquiry completely takes a different level at that way. And they gave importance to that more than the manifested world. The science gives importance to the manifested world, isn't it? And they are thinking that by their experiments they may find where this source is. But rishis are saying that we will not bother about this because this creation is not the truth. It is continuously changing. There must be something which is not changing, which is the source from where all these things have come. And that you can't reach there by experiment. That is their logic behind it. And therefore, they have thought about all these things in depth before they have come to these conclusions. So Vedas are talking only about that the source from where all this has come. That is why Bhagavatam begins with that statement, Janmadhyasya yataha. Janmadhyasya yataha. Everything, the source from where everything comes. So here you will see that that Avyayam, that talking about this, Bhavape avhi bhudanam shuto vistarashomaya Totva Kamalavatraksha Mahalpam Abhijavyayam. Mahalpam, your glories are Avyayam. It never diminishes, it never decreases. It's talking about that bodham, consciousness or the soul at that point, that aspect of Krishna. Krishna, devotee sees Krishna as a person. Jnani sees as consciousness. Jnani sees as consciousness. devotees see it as Krishna. It doesn't matter. Ultimately, the subject, Vastu is the same. Vastu is the same. The source from where everything comes. Source from where everything comes. So, and that is what he says here. Bhavapayo hi bhudhanam shuddho vistarasho maya. In that bodham, in that consciousness, creation, maintenance and dissolution, everything is continuously happening. It is happening with the background of this consciousness, bodham, our bodham. That is why that Chit Shakti is referred to. But, but although all these things are happening, it doesn't have any impact on the bodham, on the consciousness. Creation is happening, sustenance or dissolution is happening, but in spite of so many things happening, the screen behind it is not affected, which is the Chit Shakti, which is the Chit Shakti. So, we will understand this when we understand who we are. Who we are. What is our identity, who I am, and where have I come from. That is why it says, Bhavapayo hi bhudhanam. Bhavapayo hi means Srishti, creation, maintenance and destruction. Everything you can see in this consciousness happening. Bhavapayo hi bhudhanam. Bhudhanam means living entities. They are taking birth, they are living, and then they are dying. And all this appearance, maintenance and their destruction is all happening in the bodham, adhishtanam, or the basis of the soul. It's the soul that is the basis where all these things are happening. All this is happening. So, bhavapayo hi bhudanam shuddho vistarasho maya. So in other words, this evolution or this dissolution or these things are happening every day in us. If you observe carefully, you will notice that. So what happens to us? We go to sleep at night, isn't it? And when we are in the deep sleep, the body doesn't exist, the material world doesn't exist. We have already dissolved there at that time. That is that dissolution what we are talking about. We have to connect that with our own life in this world. Otherwise it makes no sense. If you are thinking about dissolution of the planet after the millions and millions of years, that doesn't mean. What it means here is that Krishna is saying, Arjuna is saying here, Shuddho Vistara Bhavapayo hi bhudanam. Living entities, they appear in the morning and then they have their in the vacant state they stay, and then they go through the dream state and into the deep sleep where they lose their body as well as their mind, and everything is dissolved. They themselves dissolve in the avyaktam. Avyaktam means unmanifested. Unmanifested. So practically it is happening every night. Every night it is happening. If you look into Bhagavad Gita, you will see some very interesting statements. When Krishna talks about the body in the 13th chapter, if you look how Krishna presents the body and see the difference between a doctor's or medical presentation of the body, you will see there that Krishna wants to define the body. It is in the early verses in the 16th chapter, or in the 13th chapter. In the 13th chapter, and he says there, if you look into the yeah. If you look into verse 5, it says there, Rishubhir Bahuda Proktam, Bahuda Gidam, Chandobir Vividhai Prathak, Brahma Sutra Padesh Cheva, Hedu Madbhir Vinishchidei. It's quite an unusual way of presenting this gross body. Rishubhir Bahuda Gidam, he says, sages have spoken in many different ways. I'll read the translation. The knowledge of the field of activities and the knower of activities is described by various sages in various Vedic writings, especially in the Vedanta Sutra, and is presented with all reasoning as to cause and effect. If you read Brahma Sutram, you will see there that the origin of this body, how it is explained, totally different than the way the medical science is going to tell us. And when you put the logic of Vedavyas into it, you will see how correct he is. He is saying that this body, as long as the soul is present inside, it has some meaning. The moment soul leaves the body, whatever experiment you do with this body will never become perfect. His point is that. That is why in medical science, they do all the research on the dead body, isn't it? All the science, doctors and all, every day they collect all the dead bodies, whoever can offer their body for research. Vedavyas's point is that, and then they cut pieces and take it out and open up, and all kinds of experiments they do with this body. He is saying that the soul, while he is inside this body, it has some meaning. And how that soul controls the body, how the soul's presence in the body affects the body is very difficult to say. It's very difficult to say. That is why Rishabhir Bahuda Gita, he says there in that verse. In different ways, different sages have spoken about it. And you can't blame them for that, because the soul is such, there is no one way you can say it will act like this. That's the beauty of the spiritual life. When the soul is present in matter, how that matter will react to any situation is very difficult to clearly define. Because each soul, when soul is present in matter, it acts in different ways. That is why it says Rishabhir Bahuda Gidam. It says Bahuda Gidam. For example, tell you, Ayurvedam will say that you have got air, bile, mucus, the balance of these three things, isn't it? Vata, Pitta, Kapam. Tridosham they call it. The three. Ayurvedam talks about that. The balancing of these three things. The Vedantam says this body has come from Prarabdham. Prarabdham is the cause of this body. That is the Vedanta conclusion. Prarabdham is the cause of this body. Now, if you ask which one is right, both are right. Both are right. In one level, if you look at it, Vedantam is right. Prarabdham is the cause of the whole problem with this gross body. On the other level, as far as maintaining this body is concerned, Ayurvedam can help you also. Can help you also. So clearly to put your finger and say that this is it, what has caused this body, how this body is reacting to every situation is very difficult. That is why Krishna is not giving a straight answer. Have you noticed that? He's not giving you a straight answer. Why? Because he is saying, sages have spoken like this. Rishabhir Bahuda Gidam. He says, Rishabhi, the sages, Bahuda Gidam, they have spoken in many different ways about this body. Whereas medical science won't accept all these things. Medical science will say, we have done the research, we have got this result, but they are never perfect, if you observe. That never they can give you a clear-cut answer about the body. About the body. They can never give that because they are experimenting with the dead body and coming out with the results. This is the problem. They are coming with the results. So that is why in that verse, if you look, you will see Krishna took only 2 verses to describe this body. That is the verse 6 and 7. Mahabodhanyahangaro buddhir avyaktamevacha indriyani deshaikamcha panchachendriya gocharaha ichadvesha sukham dukham sangadhaschedana dhriti edakshetram samasena savikaram udakridam. In these 2 verses, Krishna spoke what he had to say about the body. Can you imagine? And after saying that, you see, that's all Krishna wanted to say about the body. He says, Mahabhudani ahangaram buddhi avyaktam indriyani dashaigam panchachendriya gochari. Then icha dvesham sukham dukham sanghadam chetana dhriti edat kshetram samasena savikaram udahridam. If you analyze those 2 verses, it is very simple. The first verse is about the gross body, the second verse is about the subtle body. That's all. It is. Finished. There's nothing more to it than that. That is the Krishna's point. You are giving so much importance to this gross body and trying to analyze this and making experiments and research and all kinds of things. Why? Because you have completely misunderstood what you are, first of all. He says here Mahabhudani. Mahabhudani means the 5 material elements. Panchamahabhudam. 5 material elements. Then Ahangaram. That is the basis from where everything begins. False ego. And based on that, Buddhi Avyaktam Evaja. Avyaktam means that that is the state when you go to sleep. That is the Avyaktam state. Avyaktam state is Vyaktam comes. Vyaktam means manifested. From unmanifested comes manifested something, isn't it? So when we go to sleep at night, we go to that unmanifested state. Avyaktam it is. Nothing is clear at that time. Body doesn't exist. Mind doesn't exist. And senses doesn't exist. Nothing exists. What exists then? What is existing? Only the soul existing at that time. And that too, we are experiencing that existing. The proof of that is when you wake up from the deep sleep and you come back, that you remember that experience of that happiness, what you had in the deep sleep, is the proof of that existence of the soul at that time. So only you existed in the deep sleep, nothing else existed. Body didn't exist, the mind didn't exist. Mahabhutani ahangaram, then buddhi. Buddhi is the intelligence. Avyaktam evacha. Avyaktam means that unmanifested state. So creation, as far as Bhagavad Gita is concerned, is like that. Every night we are created, every morning we are created, and every night we are gone. We come back again the next morning. That is our real nature. That is what it is. Every morning this body is given, we enter into the body and the whole thing functions. Every night we leave the body and go back to Avyaktam, to unmanifested state. That's why. Indriyana Deshaigamcha. Then the 5 senses of knowledge and 5 senses of action, which we know what it is. Shabdam, Shabda Sparsha Rupa Rasa Gantham, which you know, sound, touch, hear, smell, and sound, touch, hear, smell, and taste. Yeah. So Shabdam, sound, Sparsham, touch, Rupam, form, Rupam, Rasam, taste, and Gandham, smell. So the 5 senses of knowledge and the 5 senses of action also. These all what we do during the day, isn't it? There's nothing else happening in us except these 5 senses of knowledge and senses of action is interacting. And Panchajendriya, Indriya Gochare. What else? Panchajendriya Gochare. That these senses requires sense objects to interact with. So sense objects also to interact with. That is the gross body, what Krishna is saying. Krishna, if you study anatomy in medicine and branches of medicine like that, there is so much written, so many books what they have created about this body. And when you start reading all that, you will start wondering that is this, because they are keeping that matter only as a separate thing from the soul. But actually, it is due to the presence of the soul only that has any meaning. All this anatomy, everything has some meaning only when you are present inside there. And that is why Krishna is saying here, from there, Icha, Dvesham, Sukham, Dukham. Icha means desire. It is from desire everything comes. We desire. And this desire is the whole, and the desire comes from false ego. Desire comes from false ego. So false ego, desire go together, and from desire comes, we can see Dvesham, Sukham, Dukham, Sanghadam. Sanghadam means all these things, what the first verse has spoken, that means the gross body, the mind, intelligence, senses, and everything, it's all kept together, and there is a point where it is tied to, and that is called Sanghadam. Sanghadam means you need some kind of a post to which everything is tied together so that it can function as one unit. And that Sanghadam is Ahangara, false ego. If the false ego is not there, all these things cannot work together. It's false ego that is keeping the whole thing together. It's not the gross false ego what we talk about. We talk about all of us have false ego in us. And that false ego operates like this through the combination of all these things. Eda kshetram samasena savikaram udahradam. Krishna used the word very selectively there. He says, this kshetram, this body, samasena, I am talking to you in a nutshell. Why? Savikaram udahradam. It is meant to change all the time. Everything that is spoken in these 2 verses continuously changes. Because it is changing, Krishna says, Savikaram. Vikaram means it is subject to change all the time. and they will, because they are continuously changing, that is not the truth. There itself Krishna cut off everything, saying that that is not the truth. What is changing cannot be truth, isn't it? It's understandable. Anything that is continuously changing, it cannot be the truth. Something that which doesn't change has to be the truth, and truth never changes, and that is why he mentions it like that. So in this verse, Krishna is saying, Arjuna mentioned here, that Tattva Kamalamatrasha Mahalmyam Avijavayam, Avayam, the inexhaustible nature of the soul he has spoken about here. And you can see after that he says here that that bodham, ahamasmi, that consciousness inside, which it is there that all this creation happens, the maintenance happens, the dissolution happens, everything is happening here. All these things will be understood when we realize ourselves, what we are, what's our identity. So these srishti, creation or dissolution is all happening every night within us. Within us. Shuddho vistaresho maya. He says here. So how did this this creation happen? And where does the creation eventually dissolve? Why? Because the basis of everything is the soul. Basis of everything is the soul. So in soul stands this creation. And in the soul, because of the presence of the soul, the creation goes on. And because of the presence of the soul, eventually it dissolves everything into the soul again. That is referred to as the Chit Shakti. Chit Shakti. So how many you will see in the Bhagavatam a lot of Avataram mentions there, isn't it? Incarnations. So many incarnations spoken. And Avataram. How many Avataram? Actually, everything in this creation is Avataram. Krishna's Avataram. That is why in the Bhagavatam you will see Avataram Sankhyoyam. Unlimited, Krishna says there. That's how you have to understand that verse. 24 major incarnations were spoken in the Bhagavatam. If you read the third chapter, you will see 24 major incarnations. After saying that, Narada Maharshi says to Vedavyas, this is not the only incarnations. Avadaram Asankhoyam. There is unlimited incarnations happening in this creation. Why? Every living entity is an incarnation of Krishna in one way or the other, isn't it? One way or the other. So therefore it says everything that comes out, manifests from that consciousness is an avataram, is an incarnation. Is an incarnation. Yada vidasa sahasrasha. So just like from a huge lake, so many channels are coming out, water is flowing away. Similarly, Brahman, all these different incarnations are happening. So everything what you perceive in this creation is Krishna's avataram or Krishna's form. So if you remove the name and form from everything, it is Brahman. It is Brahman. If you look at the name and form, it is the world. It's the world. If you remove the name and form, it is Brahman. That is how you have to, the preliminary understanding of that. Name and form makes everything as the world. You experience it as the world. Namarubam. Whereas if you take name and form, there is no male, there is no female, there is no there is no plant, there is no tree, and in everything there is only one Vastu who is present, that is the soul. And Prapancham or creation itself is completely that Brahman, what is present here. And this is Krishna's Mahalmyam, what Arjuna is talking about there. Bhavapayav hi bhutanam shruto vistarasho maya tattva kamala patraksha mahalmyam. That word Mahalmyam is referring to that. That in present in everything, in different names and forms. If you start observing everything in this creation with a particular name and form, then it is the world what you are seeing. If you remove the name and form, and if you only see the substance in that, the essence of it, which is Brahman, and that is Krishna's Mahalmyam. Mahalmyam, Krishna's glory. That is what Mahalmyam is talking about. Like earlier, we saw what is moham means. The Mahatmyam is this, that he is present in everything, but you don't know that he is present. You are only seeing the name and the form outside. So that is what Krishna says here, that in all these things, and if you have Mahatmyam Abhija Avyayam, so in other words, you have started experiencing everything, Krishna's presence there. Arjuna says here to Krishna that whatever I have understood now, I want to see it in that way. I want to see it in that way. Krishna says to him, Krishna, because earlier Krishna has told Arjuna something more interesting. Krishna put it in like this way to Arjuna. Arjuna, in everything I am present. In the Vibhuti Yogam, that is how he put it. He puts it there. If you look into the chapter 9, 4th verse, you will see there how Krishna puts there. In the 9th chapter, in the 4th verse, he says, Mayatadam idam sarvam jagad avyakta murtina. 9th chapter, 4th verse. It's so complicated this way Krishna has explained it to Arjuna. Mayatadam idam sarvam jagad avyakta murtina. Matstani sarva bhutani na chaham teshu avastida. Mayadadamidam sarvam jagadavyakta murtina matstani sarvabhutani nachaham teshu avasthina. Look at that. By me, in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. Mayadadamidam sarvam jagadavyakta murtina matstani sarvabhutani nachaham teshu avasthida. Krishna says there. So here, that statement in that chapter made Arjuna to understand that what is Krishna? When we talk about Krishna, okay, as a devotee we are concerned Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. We accept that, there is no problem with that. But imagine understanding this aspect of Krishna also, that the way Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is talking about himself when he spoke to Arjuna. Mayadadam idam sarvam jagad avyakta murtina matstani sarva bhutani na chaham teshu avasthida. I am present in everyone. Jagad avyakta murtina. Nobody knows me, but I am there. He says, Jagad avyakta murtina. Matstani sarva bhutani. I am in everybody present there. Na chaham teshu avasthida. But nobody is in me. All these statements, when you have to connect with Arjuna, when he talks about here, that he says here, that this whole universe, what you see in this creation, I am present in that. Krishna is saying here in that verse, isn't it? Mastani sarva bhutani. I am present everywhere. So, when Krishna said that, Arjuna says, I would like to see that. How you are present in all of them. This was Arjuna's problem. Arjuna is hearing all these words from Krishna, and Arjuna is thinking, if I could experience that, what Krishna has spoken, that is why. And when he said like that, that is why Arjuna is going to put his request to Krishna now. In the next 1 or 2 verses we will see here, that in other words, Krishna's presence, all pervading presence in everything, in the whole creation. Because Krishna said to Arjuna before, that Mayadadam idam sarvam jagad avyakta murtina. When Krishna says this to Arjuna, then I am present in everyone, in everything. Matstani sarva bhutani, but they are not present in me. Arjuna was a little bit curious to find out what is that? How are you present in everything? So that's when he was asking to understand this universal presence of Krishna, how he is present. So in other words, Vishwarupa Darshanam, this universal form, is only an expansion of Krishna's energy. How Krishna's energy is expanded the whole creation. So, Vishwam, how it's present here. In other words, realizing that Pranan is Krishna's energy, isn't it? Krishna is present in us also. Why? Only because Krishna is present in us that we have got this Prana Shakti. Prana Shakti means this ability to do things, ability to move, ability to function, everything is coming from the Prana. So that Prana Shakti, the power of Prana, is coming from Krishna's universal presence in everything. So, in order to see that, want to see that Pranan or want to experience that Pranan, science is telling us that, science is saying to us that here, For example, they talk about this mic. They're saying that there is no mic here. Actually, what is present here is the electrons and the protons and the neutrons, the way the scientific language is explaining. So they are also saying the atoms and the molecules and all kinds of things. So, and they say that in everything in this creation there is a vibration going on. There is a vibration going on. And that stands in this form of the mic. If you study physics, you will see they're explaining all these things. So they say that everything is vibration. Spandanam is going on. So suppose you experience this whole creation with that vibration going on in every object in this world. Suppose, and in your own body, when we, at the moment, we are in the body, but we have no identification with the soul. We don't know what we are. Sometimes you will notice that we say we are in the bodily concept of life. Actually, it is a misunderstanding. That word itself is. Consciousness cannot touch the body. Consciousness cannot touch the body. Consciousness is only for the soul. When you're touching the body, what you are experiencing actually is not the consciousness of the body. You are experiencing actually the consciousness of the soul. So that is why this Sharira Bhodham or Sharira body is a dead thing. But because you have consciousness inside, when you touch the body, you feel the consciousness. Otherwise, you can't experience consciousness. The presence of the soul creates this experience of consciousness in a body. Body can never experience any bottom. Body cannot have consciousness. Body is dead matter. But we feel that there is consciousness in the body because the soul is inside. It's a little different than the way we think about it. If you think about it, you will see that, understand that. When you see that difference between the body and the soul, when Krishna talks about it later in the Bhagavad Gita, you will see this. Then, suppose there is a fly comes and sits on my body. It can sit anywhere on this body. But it is sitting on my body, isn't it? Whether it is on the leg or it is on my head. But for that fly, if it is sitting on my leg, it will see that there is a long distance it has to travel to get to my head, isn't it? To get to my head. So, but he is sitting on the body and the consciousness is present on the leg as well as on the head. So, irrespective of the fly moves from the leg to the head, I am experiencing the presence of the fly, whether it is on the leg or it is on the head. So, similarly, so many things are happening in this world, isn't it? But we are not aware of now so many things what's going on. Why we are not? Because we can't. We don't have that consciousness like that. Our consciousness will only able to report back something what is experienced to a limited level, to a limited extent. For example, I am sitting here now. I don't know what's happening in some place in America. What else is going on there? I don't know anything about it. I'm not conscious of that, isn't it? Because, but if your body becomes the whole world, what will happen? Anywhere, everywhere, whatever happens, you become conscious of that. That is why Upanishads will say like this, Ahameva Vishwadavam Narayanaya Namaha. Vishwam, when the whole world becomes your own body, that Vishwadaram, it becomes your own body, and one who has come to that realization, that Sashaka realization, his energy will expand and it will permeate into everything in this creation. And that is what has happened to Arjuna. That's what Krishna was able to take Arjuna to that level that he started experiencing his presence in everything. When we talk about that presence of Krishna means that realization, this is what we have to understand. From the soul, everything has come, isn't it? Soul is the basis. And it is that soul is Krishna. And Krishna is saying that Arjuna, now you experience my universal form, what I am. You see me now. And Arjuna started experiencing for a short period of time from this state of Krishna, as Krishna's state. That means he is not identifying with own limited material body, he is identifying with the creation. And in that experience, in that identification, what he is experiencing is the universal form what is spoken in the Bhagavad Gita. That's how you have to understand. Otherwise, if you simply think Arjuna was standing there and Krishna was showing some big form with lots of eyes, lot of hands, lot of legs, and then Arjuna got frightened with that. No, that's not what it is. Arjuna is seeing that in the whole creation is Krishna. And he gave that experience to Arjuna for a while, but because he was still in his gross body, he could not sustain that for very long. If you have left your gross body and you have become identified with that all-pervasive aspect of Krishna, then there is no more fear existing anymore. That is why that particular kind of liberation, what that jnanis are looking for, is a kind of liberation where they become oneness with the truth, isn't it? Sayujyam they refer to. It's that state where they have completely become one with the truth. That is their realization on that. A devotee do not opt that he like to continue his relationship with Krishna in a personal level. That's all the difference is. Both are correct in their own way. Both have their own right to do what they do. That's justified. Devotee likes to continue his relationship with Krishna in some form, and that he is also given the opportunity to do so. But jnanis have that option, that they believe in that this realization that makes them happy to become one with the truth. There is no more, afterwards there is no more repeated birth and death. That's what he says here. So everything, when your pranam has permeated like that throughout the creation, you can see that everything is happening within you. In one place, you can experience that, and in one place again. So many people have spoken about that. So such an experience is Arjuna is going to ask Krishna. That experience. That is what in the next verse, what you will see. We'll read that verse and we'll continue next on tomorrow. Verse 3. Evametan yatha Evametan yatha tattvam Atmanam parameshwaram Drashtum ichhami te rupam Aishwaram Purushottamam Evametan yatha tattvam Atmanam parameshwaram Drashtum ichhami te rupam Aishwaram Purushottamam Evam edad yatha tattvam Atmanam parameshwaram Parameshwara drashtum ichhami te rupam Aishwaram Purushottama. O greatest of all personalities, O supreme form, though I see here before me your actual position, I yet wish to see how you have entered into this cosmic manifestation. I want to see that form of yours. Basically, Arjuna is asking Krishna, how, when you say that you have spread all over the creation, how did that happen? How do you experience that? And Arjuna wants to experience that. Arjuna also wanted to experience that. So Krishna gave that opportunity later on. So we'll continue tomorrow. All glory to Srila Prabhupada.
Srila Prabhupada ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.